Hello and welcome to our history class. Today our topic is the English Revolution in the 17th century. As French students, you have already heard about the French Revolution in 1789, but did you know that the British had their own revolution a long time before us during the 17th century? That's what we are going to study today. Actually, there were two revolutions in England during the 17th century. Let's study the first one, which is usually called the English Civil War and took place between 1642 and 1651. There were two main issues leading to this revolution, political and religious ones. To begin with, let's have a look at the political issues. You have to know that originally English monarchs had a lot of powers. The monarch was the head of the state, of the judiciary, the supreme governor of the Church of England, and ruled over the military and diplomacy. Any law voted by Parliament needed the king's approval. However, since the 12th century, monarchs had been required to address Parliament before imposing any new taxes. Please, note that last point, it will be important later. In 1603, James I Stuart became the new King of England. The Stuarts were Scottish, which was a good reason for the English Parliament not to like him in the first place. His policy didn't help him to be appreciated either. As many kings in Europe at that time, he wanted to become an absolute monarch. Don't forget that the 17th century was Louis XIV's one in France. In 1629, his son, Charles I, decided to govern England alone, without calling the Parliament together, until he needed help to vote new taxes in 1640. You can imagine that parliamentarians would remind the king that he had forgotten them. But before going further, let's study the religious issues. You must know that the main part of the English population is Protestant, more exactly Anglicans. Another branch of Protestantism is present in England, the Puritans, but they were a minority. There was also a Catholic minority. The monarch was the chief of the Anglican Church, and the Parliament acted like it was a defender of Protestantism. But Charles I married a French Catholic, Marie-Henriette de France. At the same time, he repressed the Puritans. The Parliament accused him to attack more Protestants than Catholics. So, with those political and religious issues, you now understand why the relations between Charles I and the Parliament had been tense when Charles I called the Parliament together again in 1640 after 11 years. The fact was, Charles I needed the Parliament's agreement to vote a new tax in order to pay for a war in Scotland, where the population was rising up against his power. The Parliament didn't accept to vote for it and divided it into two factions. The supporters of Parliament on one side, called the Roundheads, and those of the king on the other one, called the Cavaliers. And so the Civil War broke out. After many twists and turns, Charles was defeated and executed after his judgment in 1649. Oliver Cromwell, a general who had fought on the parliamentarian side, abolished the monarchy and set up a republic which soon turned into a military dictatorship until his death in 1658. In 1660, the monarchy was restored with a new king, Charles II, the executed king's son, who had fled and lived in exile in France until then. But this is not the end of the story. To avoid new problems with the king, the Parliament voted the Habeas Corpus Act in 1679. This act protected individual freedom, forbidding illegal imprisonment without true reason. As a consequence, the king could no longer have parliamentarians arrested only because of their ideas. His power was limited. In 1685, Charles II died and his brother, James II, acceded to the throne. From the beginning of his reign, his relations with the Parliament were bad because he was Catholic. In 1688, the king had a son and he baptized him as a Catholic. It was too much for the Parliament, who called the Protestant king's son-in-law, William of Orange, to replace him. This event is called the Glorious Revolution. William of Orange came from the Netherlands to England and James II ran away to France. William and his wife Mary became new King and Queen of England under the condition they signed two texts, the Bill of Rights and the Toleration Act. The Bill of Rights increased Parliament's powers and gave new liberties to English subjects. The Toleration Act gave religious freedom to Puritans but didn't permit Catholicism. The main consequences of those revolutions was that England became a constitutional monarchy. The monarchs could no longer govern without the Parliament's agreement. Enlightenment philosophers like Voltaire or Montesquieu admired the British model of freedom and used it to criticize the absolute power of the French king. The British model has also inspired the revolution in the USA and France during the 18th century.